Dating is my whole life. It is my obsession. The vampire, which is my talent, does not suffer other suitors. This is the sacrifice that the act of creation requires, a blood sacrifice. For only through the body, through the pulling of flesh, can the human soul be transformed.
Si pasan los días y tú desesperando y yo pensando quizás estás perdiendo el tiempo pensando por lo que más tú quieras. ¿Hasta cuándo? Y así pasan los días y yo desesperado y tú contestando.
The wall is too big. Some birds that don't really fly, they just hop. Maybe that affects the birding industry, which again, we don't really have manufacturing here too much. It's mostly service economy, so it's tourist. So having an ugly border wall is going to affect tourism. People will see it on TV that there's this wall there. They don't want to go fishing by the river. They don't want to go swimming. They don't want to go on a canoe or anything like that. Already we have a problem with drugs in the river, but people still swim in the river. I've swam in the river many times. But if you put a wall there, how can you even see the river? And these both countries, I mean, we're tied, at least in this part of the country.
I think if we could find a way to work with Mexico to talk about how to help them improve their economy, people wouldn't have to come here. They don't want to come here. I mean, they don't want to leave their families behind, but what choice do they have? They can't stay there and watch their families go hungry. And the journey to come here is perilous, absolutely perilous.
So our economy affects the next country. This border wall, it's a big problem because
they have to pay all this money. They go through tunnels, they go through deserts. And I always say, you know, it's like Darwin, the survival of the fittest. The ones that make it here, they are the strongest, the most ambitious, the most fearless, the most creative, or they'd never, ever do it. The ones that don't have that drive, they stay in Mexico. So you already know that the ones that come here have the potential for being the best of the best if we could educate them. And they get it all backwards. The American government actually thinks that these people are the worst of the worst when they're really the best of the best, or they'd never survive the journey, nor would they. I mean, if it was the other way around, and white Americans had to go to Mexico to make a living, do you think they could figure out how to get there? Do you think they could survive there under these conditions? Never, never. It's really, to me, it's really a shame that people have to do this.
every corner is disappearing around here. Those are all new homes over there. Everything is changing from farming to houses.
But if they're going to do it, we could at least respect them, since they take care of our hotels and clean our houses and pick our food and prepare our food and serve our food. They even cook. You go into all the restaurants, now even in New York, Italian, Jewish, Greek, Japanese, all Mexicans cooking. Because they adapt quickly, because they learn easily, and because they're willing to work harder than anyone else. Oh, don't let me stop, sorry. I go on about it because it just gets me so mad. My father was a farmer.
On the other side, my mother was a very good Scotch-Irish white lady who fell in love with my father in an elevator. Well, it's true. Anyway, and she loved him and the culture so much that she became a Spanish teacher. She completely absorbed the culture. We went every summer to Mexico, and that was, she became one of the top Spanish teachers in the high school. Anyway, so here I am on the border, right? That's the kind of border. There's other kinds of borders.
It's one economy in the border. It's a borderlands, like Gloria talked about. It's not totally American, y no es totalmente mexicana. It's a little bit of both. So
I think that people like Gloria took what was previously a kind of colloquial discussion on the border, and they began to create from it really important theories that could be useful to us, both in resistance and affirmation, because the border does both things for us.
And Gloria appreciated that division and that need to make peace with that split and our mestizaje, our duality.
Right.
Yeah, me too, you know. Tejana, Jewish, Russian.
I know, that's right.
You know, and having to, growing up speaking Spanish and hearing Yiddish and hearing black street talk, because I grew up in an all-black neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, you know, which is my culture? Let's see, there's 3 languages, there's all these different people with all these different opinions about language and culture.
And I think most especially for the women, her writing about the mestiza and taking it to other levels beyond just racial ones, and really looking at sexual borders and other kinds of meanings was very powerful, and no one had done it before.
The focus of the historical studies is the people who lived on the borderlands, whether they were indigenous people or mestizos, people who did not have a claim to fame as we would think of it, but rather the people that struggled on a daily basis to live and to raise families and to grow crops and to develop social relations.
And so that idea of Aztlán being severed by the border is a very old concept.
This country already forgets that the Berlin Wall came down, and the whole world was happy because the Berlin Wall came down. And here we are in South Texas building a wall.
We shift the focus not only from great men, great events, but also to people of color and to women.
The work that we do here is always multi-layered. It is inclusive of all identities, and it always seeks to expose the side of issues that is not in mainstream media.
And so Gloria takes the experience of South Texas in particular and centers the daily life of the people, the struggles, and out of that daily life and her analysis of it creates theory. She gives then voice,
a certain kind of language we were missing,
and constructs and concepts. And so her concepts like Nepantla and Coatlicue State were not part of the discourse, whether it was of the old borderland studies or even of the newer borderland studies that was developing.
But she deepened the meaning of it so that it could be useful to all of us to explain the kind of, not just the work we did, but the lives we chose to have.
And so Gloria's work centered on gender, on race, on sexuality, in particular, and certainly on culture. And so she grows up on the border between the US and Mexico. And those are spaces indeed of great creativity, but also spaces of great conflict studies. And Gloria's work has been central to Chicano studies, as well as to women's studies, as well as to lesbian and gay studies, or queer studies, as well as to cultural studies.
There's a joke that people will say, and I'm sure that you've heard it before, we never crossed the border crossed us.
Capricho de Dios para los dos nació en el alma. Sentir que tus besos anidaran en mí, igual que palomas mensajeras de luz. Sentir que tus besos se quedaran en mí, haciendo en tus labios la señal de la cruz.
The Border Patrol gets on their boats on the other side of the dam where the recreational part is. Even from here, you can see that the water is higher over there. If you look down here, you'll see plastic bags where people carry. They swim across, they walk, or they swim and they carry their clothing, dry clothing, in a plastic bag. And we can walk down and see that there's all kinds of clothes. There's a tube, like a tire tube out there that somebody walked across. It'll help an adult to float. Just put a lid on it. The air is powerful enough to help somebody float. So they could have floated across, got over here, and then drank the water before heading out to wherever they needed to go. So we're heading south, closer to the border here, and we're going to be going to Anzalduas Park and Dam. A few years ago, they got together to fight the bridge, but now the bridge is going to be built. It's called the Anzalduas Bridge, International Bridge, and the Anzaldua family that donated the land for this park that we're going to, they still live in Granjeno, most of them. They are some of the people that are fighting this border wall still, and they are relatives of Gloria Anzaldua. So that's the bridge. Ironically, there's no water, but it's still a bridge. It's a bridge over dry land because this is a floodway, y aquí se ven las estacas donde el gobierno está tratando de medir el tamaño de los terrenos de los rancheros aquí para ver pues dónde poner el muro que están pensando de poner. These are very clean cuts. It wasn't a mistake. You can see that it's very clean cut on both of these. So they're there. Anybody wants to use them, but the Border Patrol bent where the air goes, and then they also slashed it just to be sure nobody uses them anymore.
I was reading Rosario Castellanos, a Mexican poet.
Yeah, I know.
And she had a phrase called Yo vivo Nepantla.
I see.
And what she was talking about was she was between this world and this world, el mundo entre medio. But it's also a very conflicted space where you get bombarded from different cultures, different sides, different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And then that's el medio.
I know.
People who are on this Nepantla, which to me is the bridge. Mm-hmm. It's the liminal space. Mm-hmm. It's the in-between space. It's a space where in order to make any kind of change, you have to be in this kind of conflicted space. You can't get better at anything unless you've gone through the conflict. You have to be really shaken out of your customary space. You have to be, ¿cómo se dice? Anguished before you choose to make something better. Nobody says, okay, I'm going to make this a better world unless they have suffered, unless they're suffering, unless they're in this conflicted space. Does that make sense to you? I've never been with anyone, or I've never experienced any person or any organization that wants to create change if they haven't been in the space where they have been anguished, where they have been conflicted, where they have been trod upon, where they have been imposed on. And you can ask any of the people at Esperanza, why are they motivated to do this kind of work?
In 1996, I was invited by MACLA to participate in a project with 3 visual artists and 2 writers.
Some of the artists lived inside. There was a big mansion. Some of them lived inside the mansion.
In this place called Villa Montalvo, there is a place where they have artists in residences.
And we would have dinner together. So we would work on our artwork all day, and then at night we would get together and have dinner, and we would talk about the concepts of Nepantla.
And we will discuss the concepts, and then the next day we will create our art based on the discussions that we had had.
On weekends and certain times during the week, they would allow the public to come in, and the public could stroll through the campus, through the artist colony, and they could come in and talk to us and ask us questions about what we were doing. And so the community became very much involved about what we were doing, and then there was all kinds of publicity done on the project. We were told that we could do anything that we wanted to.
She was the director of the project. She told Santa to tell all of us that we needed to produce about 20 pieces of artwork for this exhibit. And of course, I almost felt like I was going to have a heart attack because it was not possible. I don't work that way. I don't produce by the day. I just produce when I create. So it was very helpful for me.
And her concepts dealt a lot with this concept of Nepantla, which was very contemporary and very ambiguous.
So much Gloria, like incorporating everything that is around, not this linear thinking. Everything was, happening at the same time, even all the worlds that she always talked about.
What she said, it could be that it was like an experience where you would go to a town that you never have been there before.
Like all the experiences that I had with her, because she, like I said, always pushed me to move beyond my limits, move beyond my boundaries.
So you're in Nepantla, you're in this unknown zone, unknown experience, but you negotiate the culture and you try to work with it, but it's an unknown area.
And the most important part for me was the fact that through Gloria's concepts, there was a way where we were given a place. We were not the marginal artists or the women of color artists. We were like, people with a place, and our work was valuable.
Being an artist, you find yourself in Nepantla because you create out of that energy. Liliana would not do her art unless she was having all these experiences. Would you?
No.
I put her on the spot. So her paintings to me are, they are the epitome of an artist struggling with her conscience, struggling with her history, struggling with her, what life has thrown at her. So she finds herself in this Nepantla space, and creation comes out of that. You can either create or you can die. You can die creatively. She had a lot of good ideas, and she also started to do artwork where she was there. She did some pieces of Coyolxauhqui, and she also felt that Coyolxauhqui was the symbol of Nepantla. And she felt Coyolxauhqui was going to be the symbol of the new millennium, because she felt that women were going to take back their power, and that Coyolxauhqui was the warrior, and Coyolxauhqui was the emblem, and Coyolxauhqui was the symbol for that millennium. And so she was very much excited about Coyolxauhqui.
And so Gloria gave voice, gave language that wasn't there before. And it comes from her own intelligence and her own study, but also from growing up in the heart of South Texas.
Pensé interminable la inmensa cosecha y siento hasta la fecha algo inconsolable, algo lamentable. Se secó el panal y aunque es tu final, yo te veo de plata aunque otros vean.
The mural that you see behind me is called La Llorona's Sacred Waters, and the central protagonist is La Llorona, and she is the basis for one of the central icons and myths of Mexican feminism and femininity. She was a blame the victim story originally, along with La Malinche, and she's one of the central icons in our culture. She has many parallels in the world, from Medea to La Ixtabay in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, to La Ciguanaba in El Salvador, to the central character in Toni Morrison's novel Beloved.
And so you can see also a hand on her mouth. And the hand is supposed to be like a tattoo as well as the images on her arms.
And it deals with women, water, globalization, the struggles for sovereignty of indigenous lands, and for water rights of regional peoples all over the world.
And of course she has her coral snake belt, and she has the
child, in this case Afro-Latino, under her arm, and her other hand extended to save the other children who may be threatened by rising water, global warming, hurricanes, floods.
And so I brought into my classroom books like the books that Gloria Anzaldúa wrote, in particular La Llorona.
This is the other one, right?
Yeah, this is La Llorona.
Está chido.
Gracias. Gracias. Mucho gusto. Yeah, I had done another mural at this site before this one, and it was destroyed, ironically enough, by water damage.
Tú tendrás en tu casa una hoguera, tú tendrás materiales, tesoros. No sabes, mi vida, lo que diera por sacarte de tu jaulita de oro. Para él, quien dice que te quiere, eres ave de exóticos colores. Él no sabe, mi cielo, ni quién eres, solo sabe tan poquito de amores. Vuela, vuela, mujer, hagamos un nuevo nido. ¿A dónde vamos? No sé, mas te voy a querer como no te han querido. Vuela, vuela, mujer, hagamos un nuevo nido. ¿A dónde vamos? No sé.
You know what I mean? So this work was a loving collaboration between the women's building community and the painters, 100 volunteers, and it was completely designed and painted by women.
Is what makes Chicano art so different than other art. First of all, it doesn't exist just to serve the artist. It exists also to serve the community.
And got a lot of incredible community support. It was very fulfilling. I don't know how many applicants there were, but out of the group of applicants that were interested in painting a mural for the women's building, they selected 7 of us. Sort of a magical number, like the number of stars in the constellation Pleiades, which is at the top of the building behind me.
We've used a lot of these different types of media to be able to bring people together in one site and have them learn about each other's issues.
Galeria de la Raza has been around for 38 years ago when it was started by a group of about 10 artists. They named the space Galeria de la Raza, which means the gallery of the people or the gallery of the race. So the title itself just kind of goes as an umbrella term for people that identify as Chicano or Latino. There was a lot of workshops happening here, a lot of silkscreen workshops teaching people a variety of art forms.
We teach people how to be artists in a different way, because we don't really use that model where they're just in the studio suffering and they wait to be discovered. Yes. Life is more complicated than that, and I think that artists have a greater possibility of affecting a society if they're willing to think beyond their own.
A space that developed during a time of unification of people, when people wanted to find ways of developing their thoughts and their processes towards a greater purpose.
It begins with your own creative, kind of aspiration, but it has to be more than that. You can't work that way a whole lifetime, satisfying yourself. It's redundant.
Casa una hoguera.
So we support work that is produced by people that identify as Chicano or Latino, and generally the work that we showcase is work that has a political nature and that is up and coming, new, cutting edge artwork.
One person can't do anything. You need two to dialogue, and you need three to be a community, and you need a dozen to be a coalition?
The authors of this piece were myself, Juana Alicia, Miranda Bergman, Edith Boone, Susan Cervantes, Mira Desai, Yvonne Littleton, and Irene Perez. We did not all know each other. We were thrown together and we were asked to design a mural for the Women's Building, which would represent the history of women, be a standing ovation for women's liberation.
Like my race, is a synthesis of the old world and the new, of the religion and culture of the two races in our psyche, the conquerors and the conquered.
Well, I met her in 1982. I was in school and college, and the book, This Rich Comic Back, had just come out, so they were promoting the book. And I was lucky enough to be one of about 7 or 8 Chicana women that sat around with her as 21-year-olds and just hung with her and visited and bought the book and didn't read it until I was back in San Antonio, and just fell in love with the ideas that were putting out, that both Gloria and all these other women of color were putting out. And
it was quite a leap for Gloria to take from the family to become this theoretician and this writer and this intellectual and this academician. And when she went home, she transposed back into that person that she was when she was growing up in Hargill. And I think that really is just a testament to her humanity and her humility she was able to balance.
In the traditional Mexican culture, of course, family is central, but there is another ring of people beyond the family, in the extended family, that have equal importance, even though they're not by blood. And those people are through what we call compadrazgo, or the baptism within the Catholic Church. But Chicano writers and activists and artists took that same model of the co-parenting, the comadre, the co-mother, and the compadre, the co-father, and used that as a way to describe their relationships of support, loyalty, and obligation and responsibility to one another.
there was the queer, there was the women of color, there was the social justice voice that was very present, and every story was different, but every story was my story as well, and every story was the story of my mother and my grandmother as well.
But we have a relationship of co-mothering, co-parenting that has to do with our responsibility to our community. So we are co-mothers of our community. And
she was a left-handed person, but it was about thinking, being different, and those were values that I had been taught also growing up with my parents, saying don't be the same, be different.
She exposed herself as fully as she could, and she went as deep as she could into her roots and brought to us the concepts of things like the goddesses of Coyolxauhqui, Coatlicue, concepts like Nepantla, because we all have these struggles within us that are reflective of the struggles that are going on in the world. We don't have a language to speak about.
Another jaguar. This one in a mask. Gloria loved masks. A lot of her altares were masks.
Her values were about living on the border and crossing borders and being bridges as well. And I think those were also values that my mother had put out there. And she said that that the Esperanza was the first organization in the city of San Antonio to invite her.
I guess one would say that Gloria Anzaldúa was la madrina de la Esperanza.
That the only other places that she had ever been invited to present in San Antonio were at the gay bars. Nobody else, no universities, no other cultural centers were interested in bringing her.
I was ready to come back, and it's when I came back, I had met Gloria before, but I didn't know her that well. And so I knew of her writings and this bridge called my back. And so she came to read in the restaurant. And the women would gather around her, and she would read excerpts from that book.
She definitely provided some of the concepts from which we worked, and indeed informed some of the philosophies that we follow in doing the work that we do.
She was so poetic in explaining it. She had an amazing way of saying something that was so radical or so descriptive in a very poetic way. And
I remember she came into the restaurant, she was all dressed in black, and so I met her again, and she was very nice and always remained the same person. And I think that's kind of interesting in terms of how how wonderful that was about having people that you know on and off, and they go through many changes, but they always remain that inner core, and that person stays the same. So I think it speaks a lot for her volumes of humility. And then I would wind up being the one that had to drive her from here, sometimes to the university or from the university back. But originally she couldn't get into the university to speak.
And, you know, many of us are the first in our generation to live differently than our parents. You know, either by marriage, by sexual identity, by all kinds of differences. And so the women who did that was very painful for their families.
There is racism in this community. There is also sexism, and there's also homophobia. And so the Esperanza was about speaking to all those issues and try to get rid of those racist, sexist, homophobic policies that exist in this city.
And that's the way I remember her. She would come here sometimes on her way home, and we would laugh about, yeah, now I'm going home and I'm going to be this other person, and my mother still worries about me, and it's a lonely journey the writer makes.
From that moment on, we just continued to invite her, bring her back to the Esperanza, became friends, because I think, again, initially I was just, saw myself as a student, I think by, 92, and then when we brought her back again in 98 and again in 2002, we became friends.
Right about the time that I went to college was the first Chicano reader book. In 1971, 72, I had a class with Inés Tovar Avila now, and Antonia Castañeda, Jose Tomás Ibarra Frausto, and Joe Sumner were the authors, and they had collected, it's called the Chicano Literatura book. So we started with that. We went on to Tomás Rivera's Y no se lo tragó la tierra. And so from there, when I transferred to the University of Texas, there were many readers. So this was during the whole renaissance of the Chicano movement.
If you read Gloria's works, she provides the language, and she shows her own deepest struggles, her most spiritual struggles, her most intimate struggles, and that is an incredible achievement.
She ties together hearts. And the way that she ties together the hearts is that also in the way that she explains things, that she uses the voices that we're familiar. She uses the figures that we're familiar with. And I can't remember the story. It was in that book on the borders that always struck me.
The borderlands was, for me, the actual border between the U.S. and Mexico, or the U.S. and Canada, or wherever there's a border, like between two different states or two different tribes, two different communities. That was the borderlands to me. But then I started thinking in terms of emotional and cultural. So then the borderlands became not so much a blood, genetic kind of borderlands, but more of a cultural, emotional, intellectual, spiritual borderlands. So when I got into the spirituality aspect of the concept, I started using the word Papantla.
Try to emulate a lot of what Gloria has brought to us, and we're always living in Nepantla.
Yes, there comes this time where all of a sudden you're dealing with your life in respect to your death.
Although Gloria is born and raised in South Texas, she isn't taught in the high schools or the universities, and the people in her own town, I think because she's a lesbian, basically hide that. I mean, when we were there for her funeral, people didn't, they wanted to talk about how she was writing the children's books and not the books that talked about her being a lesbian.
I think we're all a little strange to our parents in our own way just because we are who we are, right? And then they want the best for us, and so I think they worried somewhat for her as well, and they were just couldn't quite grasp what why she picked such a hard road for herself. I guess that's the way they would perceive it, perhaps. So at the funeral in Hargill, so we come out of the church. So we drive all morning long and then finally make it to the church and then follow the procession to the cemetery, which I thought was also very fascinating because it was way out in the country. And at the end, and there's only a handful of people.
Traje blanco, bordado de seda, una despedida es lo que me queda. Con un traje blanco.
Men may help in constructing them, but the women tend to keep them. And I think in that way, they actually are a counterpart or a counterpoint, the opposite to the Catholic tradition of altars in the church. So by taking them into the home, then the spiritual power belongs to the practitioners of the family.
No es posible olvidar a quien se quiere tanto. Recuerda mi sonrisa mientras tanto. O cuando tu silencio irrumpa en llanto. Aquí mi corazón te está esperando.
When we talk about the altar, we're really talking about the permanent structure within a home, and it's a permanent ongoing record of the family's history. It functions as a sort of public memory, but it's also the space between the family and their beliefs and the spirituality that they hold. I've always believed that the altar that the women especially keep is a space of power, and it is also a space that is intimate and is personal. Even though these women may have enormous public lives, they have one place where they save the things that really matter and where they feel this sense of belonging. It's like a foundation to a house. My first ones were my grandmother's, and then later my mother's, and then mine. And if I had a daughter, I would give it to her. Instead, I'd teach it to other people. But I think that you need to have that basis to take those risks. She loved the ocean, and her name was Marina, which means of the sea. So she was Marina, living in Marina, which she really liked a lot. So when she died, and she'd always said to me, now when I'm gone, I want a really fancy altar, very shiny, really pretty. So I made this one. And then when my father died, so this is him and this is my mother when she was very young. Any kind of thing that is somehow a measure or a symbol of things that the family values. And often you'll find that where the altar is, there may be underneath the altar, if it's on top of a table, there may be a place where all the family papers will be.
All of this is Gloria Anzalua's papers, yeah. The whole section here. So there are currently, well, 220 boxes. Now, there are standards for arrangement of a collection, the physical arrangement and the intellectual arrangement, the preservation tools used in an archival collection, as well as cataloging and housing. There are a number of archival policies and practices that we implement in regards to every collection that we get. The Anzalua papers were quite a challenge in their extent, and we needed a lot of help to get them done.
It was really a wonderful experience, and I really got a sense of her as a person, I think, that I hadn't had before. The way in which she was not just a passionate writer, but also an amazing teacher, and the compassion that she had for her students was really wonderful to see. And as an activist, and to see all the friends that she had made throughout her life, friends that she had connected with personally but then became collaborators, so like Shari Moraga, for example.
So they contacted the university, and the Perry Castaneda Library contacted the Benson to see if we wanted this collection because it seemed to fit us much more than some of the other libraries on campus. And we said yes. We did.
You can't build a house without a foundation, and the altar is the foundation for people's spiritual and creative lives.
We're here near the bridge we're in the city of the Hidalgo, near the bridge connecting the city of Reynosa to Hidalgo here in Texas. And we can see that the Border Patrol set up these spotlights so they could see people that are trying to run from the dense tree line that is very close to the river, about 1 to 2 miles, in case they want to run from the trees to where cars might be waiting, their relatives or friends here, so that they can see when people are running from the trees to the main highway, so that they have entrance to the country.
Decía con voz de trueno, por autoridad de abuela, ten confianza en la vida, porque la vida es mi escuela. Tengo confianza en la vida, porque la vida es mi escuela.
No tengo yo pretensiones de sabio ni de elocuente, solo tengo estas dos manos y la historia de mi gente. Solo tengo estas dos manos y la historia de mi gente. Yo tengo la vida, tengo la vida, tengo la vida en las manos. Es consecuencia de ser mujer es consecuencia de ser humano. Y yo tengo la vida, tengo la vida, tengo la vida en las manos. Es consecuencia de ser mujer, es consecuencia de ser humano.
No sé de libros ni prosa, y no sé de verbos ni adverbios. Sé que amor igual a rosa, y sé de tus ojos negros. Sé que amor igual a rosa, y sé de tus ojos negros, porque yo tengo la vida, tengo la vida, tengo la vida en las manos. Es consecuencia de ser mujer, es consecuencia de ser humano. Y yo tengo la vida, tengo la vida, tengo la vida en las manos. Es consecuencia de ser mujer, es consecuencia de ser humano.
Sé temblar una guitarra